Hello, everybody. Hello to all Canadian Citizens for Charter Rights and Freedoms members across the nation. My name is Russ Cooper, and I am President and CEO of C3RF, as we call ourselves. And I'm really pleased to kick off the first session of a video presentation series that we are initiating called Major Cooper in Hot. Now, the Major Cooper part of the title, that comes from me. My nom de plume is Major Russ Cooper, retired. I use that nom de plume when I send out my updates to you on a regular basis, and have been doing so for many months now. And the in hot portion of the title is fighter pilot terminology. When a fighter pilot gets clearance to go on a target run with live weapons on a target, he gets cleared in hot, and he will acknowledge by saying cleared in hot. So today we're in hot, and our target today is the lockdown strategy imposed by Canada, and it's a terrible impact on all of our civil liberties. And today we're very fortunate to have with us on our wing Julius Ruechel. Julius, I consider him a national treasure. He's a clear thinker and analyst. He comes from a geology and agricultural background, and that might explain why he is so adept at using and assessing objective realities. He's not taken off to the side by politically correct narratives. He doesn't go there. He's by the numbers, by the facts, and what is the actual evidence. Now, what caught my attention with regards to Julius's work were two publications that he's come out with recently. The first publication, entitled "The Lies Exposed by the Numbers: Fear, Misdirection, and Institutional Deaths." The second article, and we'll speak to this article, and the second article was kind of a really neat analogy. And it's entitled "Washington's Inoculation Gamble: Calculating the Vegas Odds of Virus versus the Vaccine Risks." And we'll talk about that in depth as well. But now it's time to talk to Julius. And I got to ask you, Julius, like, why does a guy like you, geology, agricultural background, get into the messy game of analyzing COVID-19 stats and data? How did you get here? What happened?
I've been concerned for a while now about some of the lack of debate that's been happening in a number of scientific institutions. But when the COVID thing came out, and at first I thought, okay, somebody's making a mistake here. Like once I cottoned on to the fact that there's something wrong with the narrative that was being put out, as I started digging into this stuff, it's like, okay, raise the alarm, let people know, and nothing was happening. And at some point I realized, okay, I've got to push myself into the middle of this, because the cost of not speaking out is higher than the cost of speaking out. I've got to get into the middle of this and try to raise the alarm. So it began with speaking to friends and family, and slowly turned into articles and kind of grew from there.
Well, how long ago did this process start?
I wrote my first article in April of 2020.
Okay.
So I think into March, I was watching the numbers and coming out of China and all that, and I was fairly alarmed. But then there was, bit by bit, there was little tells that were showing up that this wasn't what the narrative was claiming it was. And so that's where I started looking. I mean, for example, when I watched the Twitter mobs go after Dr. John Ioannidis, when he started mentioning that this is not as dangerous as what people were saying. And yes. I mean, at that point, I thought, geez, this thing is dangerous. This guy must be wrong. But I watched everybody go after him with, smear and slanders. I was like, well, if he's wrong, one quick look at the data should show that. So I looked at what he did. I was like, okay, I don't see the flaw in his work.
I found that amazing myself. Ioannidis, I mean, he's world renowned. Yeah. He's what, the top immunologist, virologist in the world, or one of the top 5, I guess. And he was just slandered and taken to task for, suggesting that, I think he broke it out by age group, as you do. Yeah. And he said that, you look at the younger folk, you're looking at risk factors that are on the level of a seasonal flu. Yeah. But it was just terrible what they did with them. And so it must have been tough for you, because I know I started my process of feeling compelled back in about 2017, and for me it was the motion M103 and the narratives that were coming out with motion M103 Islamophobia.
Right.
So that I felt compelled to get into it, but I must say it took a lot of I don't know, I wouldn't want to say courage, but it's daunting. There's a real feeling there that you're taking a risk by stepping outside your safe cubicle and coming out with your thoughts. Did you feel that way, that you're taking a chance, taking a risk?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, especially I think that the thing that bothers me the most is when it's friends and family that are not taking it seriously, and it's like, well, you know, I don't have an axe in this fight, or I don't have an axe to grind, or a dog in this fight, right? I'm just saying, listen, look at this stuff. This is deeply alarming, and if I'm wrong, great. I'm, you know, finding out that that I'm wrong in an assumption is a cool thing, because you learn something new. But let's dig into the data and show me why I'm wrong. But to just ignore it and just pretend it doesn't exist, that's where there's a serious problem.
Well, I can tell you, I'm very, very glad that you did feel compelled, that you stepped out of your safe place, that you put yourself forward, and I'm sure that the pushing 40,000 C3RF members are very, very happy that you did too. But now, talking about what you did and what you put down on paper, I'm going to share a screen here.
Yeah.
And let's take a look at, if I can get this. Yes, here we go. It should come up shortly.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, let's take a look at this. And this is from your paper, lies exposed by the numbers.
Yeah.
And you put in there a very intriguing graph. And this graph comes out of your paper. It's the elderly population living outside of institutional settings.
Yeah.
And this is based on it's a Wuhan virus outbreak deaths inside and outside of government settings. Now let's just let you take a little time here and tell us what's on this graph and what numbers really should be jumping out of this here.
Okay, the first thing I should do is let you know that the outbreak deaths are, so it's not taking all of deaths in Canada, but rather just deaths that are linked to outbreaks, which the government defines as 2 or more cases linked to a single event or setting, right? So, but that gives you kind of a snapshot of, okay, if there's outbreaks, where are those outbreaks happening? Where are the spreading events? How deadly are those spreading events?
Right.
And that's kind of where that's actually what got me looking at or starting to write this piece, is as I realized, okay, wait a minute, if 97% of all outbreak linked deaths are happening in 3 settings inside institutions or nursing homes that are government regulated, that there's something wrong with the entire narrative that this is dangerous to everyone. And then from there, going, well, what are the actual numbers of the deaths, of the populations in which these deaths are occurring, right?
Okay.
So if you add up hospitals, nursing homes, and prisons, it comes to a total population of around 292,000 people living in those settings.
And we see that right here. Yep.
And
that's represented by the red corner of the graph here.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's how small that percentage of the population is compared to all the elderly that are living outside of that.
Okay, and that total population of elderly is 9,100,000.
That's right.
Okay, so we see 292,000 here in the red boxes being responsible, like from what I can take, out of that 292,000, we had 13,611 outbreak deaths.
That's right.
Okay.
And so on the other side of that equation is 178 outbreak linked deaths happening in the elderly or in the entire community outside of those institutional walls. And it kind of raises the question, or 2 questions. Why is it so deadly to be living inside of these settings? And the other side of it is, why are there not more people dying outside of those settings? Because of those, 9.1 million elderly, there's about 6.5 million that are extremely, or that have multiple conditions, and many of them are extremely ill and easily as vulnerable as somebody living in the nursing home.
But
So
they're not dying like the people in the nursing homes.
that's right. And so
Now,
that's where there's an alarm flag that goes up. Says, okay, there's answering both of those questions allows you to get at the heart of how this pandemic has been mismanaged throughout.
well, that's really what caught my attention up front was when I went through your paper and I looked at this graph and I said, what the heck is going on? I mean, 13,611 versus 178, and the populations that they're coming from are so different, 292,000 versus 9 million.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned about overall deaths, and I got the next graph here.
Yes.
Let's talk to it. Okay, now these are people living inside and outside of institutional settings, and it includes more than just outbreak deaths. It includes all the deaths.
That's right.
Now,
Yeah, because I decided, okay, I don't know exactly the location of all the other, I think it was 10,613 deaths that are, that don't have the contact tracing that the outbreak deaths have. But just working off of some of the government's own official announcements and official data releases, I could assign a portion of those, and then I just assigned all the rest of them where I didn't know which side of the divide they'd fall on. I assigned them all to community spread, so that give the government the benefit of the doubt, and let's see how much this story changes.
Yep.
And that's where it's just shocking that 75% of all deaths in Canada are still happening in that little tiny red square up in the left-hand corner.
Yes.
Of the 292,000 people, and that there's only 6,127 deaths in a population of 38 million.
Well, what this tells me up front is what people are doing on the outside of the institutions isn't making much of a difference when it comes to what's happening death-wise.
That's right.
It's the institutions that are the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
you could let the people on the outside of the institutions live their daily lives, go about their daily business, keep their jobs, keep their businesses.
Yeah.
And these numbers aren't going to change that much. I mean, it's so what are we doing, and what kind of pain are we inflicting on ourselves by locking down all the people who basically aren't contributing to this whole problem?
Yeah, and I mean, that's where you also start to understand where, the folks that are vulnerable, that are living outside of these institutions, have the good sense to lock their doors. And the rest of us, obviously, that are creating all of these cases aren't actually dying. So leave us alone, like we do every other winter for every other flu that comes through, so that, the herd immunity can form in those of us who are healthy, and that allows everybody else to come out of their doors again. Right. So like the vulnerable have now essentially been trapped behind their locked doors for 15 months instead of for the 6 to 8 weeks that a normal winter flu season would go on, because the lockdown slowed the spread towards getting towards herd immunity. And that's where you realize that the lockdowns aren't just a failure, they're actually causing many of the extra deaths that are happening here, because by trapping the vulnerable in their homes for 15 months while we wait for a miracle vaccine to arrive, they're never safe, right?
Okay, I just took us off share there because I think, those graphs have really made their point, and I think your comments here about what we are doing to ourselves is really, really pertinent. And now I'm just wondering off the top of my head. I mean, this is very graphic. I mean, it's hugely important. Have you had any comments? Anybody come forward and say, "Hey, this is a great assessment, a great analysis, and we want to take this forward. We've got to tell government. We've got to make sure that we do something about this." Does anybody come to you and ask that?
Yeah, I mean, the public outcry has been huge. There's been so many people that have been commenting and getting in touch, and there's quite a few folks that are also doctors and whatnot that have been in touch. So there's definitely stuff in the background and in the works.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
One of the things that has been a sort of a theme throughout is that anybody that tries to actually engage in debate with any of the government officials, with the health officials, essentially just gets stonewalled. I mean, I've written a number of letters to Dr. Tam and a couple of the provincial health ministers as well, and I mean, there's not even a response. So I
Wow.
don't expect that there's going to be a difference in this situation either. I mean, a lot of this stuff has been known by lots of people already, and we keep running into the same wall. But I think making the public more aware of it is what's going to eventually get the media to pick it up, and more importantly, just to get folks in living rooms to start to realize what's going on, and stop expecting the government to be handling this properly, and start to speak out themselves.
I think you're right. I think the public's the key. Now, I want to get into another aspect of your papers, and this one comes from your second paper, Washington's inoculation gamble. And I'm just going to share screen again here, because I want to go to a graphic that came out of that. Can you see that graphic there, Julius?
Yeah, I can see it there.
This graphic came out of your Washington paper, and in it, the bottom line is just amazing, because here you calculate the Vegas odds of dying from COVID-19.
Yeah.
And you've got your age group 0 to 17, 18 to 49, and 50 to 64, and et cetera. But you also break it out with and without pre-existing health conditions.
Yeah.
And we take a look at this, and we look at the young 0 to 17 without pre-existing health conditions, zero risk.
Yeah.
I mean, the risk is very, very low, even if they have health conditions, but zero risk if they don't.
Yeah, I mean, there was if you don't mind my jumping in, there was actually a release from Statistics Canada that specifically said that in anyone under the age of 45, there was zero deaths among people that have no comorbidities. I mean, they said that 100% of all deaths had comorbidities in that age category.
Okay.
Right. So basically, if you don't have a health condition, your chance of dying is zero based on, an entire first wave of data.
Okay, and the zero risk without those health conditions, at zero risk, you take it out to age 49, from age 0 to 49, zero risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used the 49 because I was working off of in that paper. I was working off of the U.S. numbers for the actual risk by age group. So those are the numbers from the CDC. So the Canadian and the U.S. Categories don't overlap exactly, but it's close enough to make the point.
Okay, I just stopped sharing there because I think the point's been made, but this leads us into the next item, and that's vaccinations. If we're looking at vaccinations and a vaccination program that is dealing with experimental use authorization only. Yeah. These are not approved vaccines. They haven't been. They're not fully licensed, not fully approved. They are approved for. They are authorized for emergency use.
That's right.
As such, they're still experimental. Now, these experimental vaccines, if you go into the underpinnings of what's required for a person to take them, informed consent is required. Yeah. And when you're talking about informed consent, you're talking about having the information that allows you to break out your personal risk-benefit scenario. Yeah. Now we're looking at this that last graphic and seeing the risk is zero for these younger people with no comorbidities. Yeah. So we have to ask, why are they even being offered the vaccine in the first place? If there can be no benefit that's going to be available to them, because there is absolutely no risk. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very clear standard, even in our. I mean, it comes originally from the Nuremberg Code after the Second World War, making it very clear that any medical condition or medical treatment that's administered requires the informed consent, and it lays out what it takes to have informed consent, right? That you understand both the risks that you are taking with the vaccine or with any treatment and the risk that you're trying to offset. So if those two things are not clear, or if there's any coercion involved in getting you to take that medical treatment, it's illegal. And even in our country, the Supreme Court has reaffirmed that on multiple occasions. So like, and it's not just for emergency use, like experimental treatments, it's for any kind of treatment. I mean, going in for a surgery, anything like that, you have to conform to those standards for informed consent. And the fact that we're not doing that it is criminal. Like I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here when I say that.
I mean, we have a situation where basically the whole premise behind the taking the vaccine is one of informed consent, and let's face it, the information is just not available there. As a matter of fact, it looks like the information is being held back.
Very much so.
I mean, you dug this up. A private citizen went to the data tables, got your own numbers. You dug this up. Why can't our scientists figure this out? Why can't our medical professionals tell us that we shouldn't be rolling out vaccines to the young with no comorbidities, because it's absolutely no benefit to them.
Yeah.
So what's going on with science? What's happening?
Yeah, actually, before I answer that, I just pulled up the name of the Supreme Court case is Ruechel versus Hughes, and it was in 1980, and it
Excellent.
was Supreme Court of Canada. So folks can look that up. And on my Twitter feed, I just actually posted yesterday a letter from a retired doctor that actually goes through and explains specifically what the conditions are for the informed consent and the consequences of that court case here in Canada.
What is your Twitter feed handle? What do you go by?
At Julius Ruechel.
Excellent. Okay, so I think I got a feeling a lot of people are going to want to take a look at your Twitter feed and take a look at those references there. Yeah. It's just absolutely incredible. Yeah. But getting back to what we're talking about, what are the scientists doing? I mean, they exist to serve their communities. They exist to serve the Canadian public. Yeah. What's going on?
One of the things that has struck me is that there's such a when the lockdown started, it was like, okay, how are we going to save the world? Is kind of this attitude that a lot of the scientists and politicians took. And the moment they decided to use the vaccine as an exit strategy, a lot of them pinned their reputations on that. And so at that point, especially in this cancel culture environment, where anybody that says something that goes against the narrative has their careers threatened, they almost can't deviate from it, right? Yes. And so at that point, the truth becomes an obstacle to the goal that they're trying to achieve. And so, at this point, it seems like they're defending the vaccine strategy against any kind of rationality, because they really do, and to some sense, their careers are now tied to that.
I remember that, and I remember thinking the same thing way back in March of 2020, that they really seem to be setting up this vaccine as a be all end all, as the silver bullet. Yeah. We can't do anything until we get the vaccine, so we better lock down and stay safe, and we got your back and all the rest of it. Yeah. But in doing so, what they did was they basically threw out all of the work of 100 years worth of epidemiology. Yeah. In the form of the WHO's own planning guidelines pandemic planning guidelines from 2019. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater, and those pandemic planning guidelines specifically stated, don't shut down borders, and don't lock down the economy, and don't lock down society. It's the worst thing you could do. Boom, that was gone. But I also noted at the same time that there was a lot of, we talk about social media and the pressure that was being generated by the social media. It was horrendous. I mean, and I read articles and stories about the United Kingdom, for example. I don't know if you heard this, but United Kingdom was thinking about going the way of the WHO's pandemic planning guideline and follow that set of rules. And they were hammered by social media. They had all these social media sites popped up and just were throwing bombs at the government, at Boris Johnson. And it got to the point where the government it looked like it relented. And I think the thing that really knocked it all off was Niall Ferguson's report from the Imperial College that had exaggerated death rates. He used a death rate of 3.4% when actually it's down, depending on age, down to as low as 0.05 or whatever. But that was just a paper that was just full of falsities, and that helped as well. But we had all the social pressure, and we had all this bad information, and but how many things to come together before you say that can't be a coincidence?
Yeah, I mean, the lockdowns themselves, or what was it, the face masks. One of the BBC reporters actually commented on it, that they had heard that the WHO recommended them not be, even though the data didn't support it, that political lobbying had essentially tilted them towards imposing it anyways, and that the WHO did not deny this. So I mean, you can see where the politicians who are running things based on poll numbers notice that, you know what, folks want to be safe, they want their masks, let's give it to them, because then I'm the hero. Whereas if I don't, I look like I'm, you know, making people or putting people at risk, and therefore my poll numbers will go down. And I mean, we've seen that even in Ontario here, where, I mean, Doug Ford seems to be running his entire policy making machine based on what surveys and are, you know, going and taking a poll out of the public opinion. Well, in a sense, we've turned over policy making in the pandemic to poll makers and public opinion. That's nuts.
I
But I
think
think
I think we just might have answered that question. What's happened to science? I think science has become politics.
Yeah,
is what has happened.
Well, I mean, we've seen that in a number of sciences now over the years, where, you know, whoever makes the alarmist narrative in their scientific field gets the funding. So there's an enormous competition for funding, like to get at the government funds that are being divvied out. And if you have the wrong narrative, your career is probably going down a dead end road, because nobody's going to fund your research and help you, you know, further up the ladder. So that is a huge component to what's going on.
So we've got we've got science turning into politics. We've got funding issues, the way money's handed out, because that's subject to political narratives. We've got social pressure coming to bear. We've got big tech doing their thing. They obviously have a dog in the fight, because there are some things that they will let go through their servers and some things they won't. So we seem to be up against a pretty big problem here when it comes to getting the services and the information we need as lowly citizens. What can those lowly citizens do? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think part of this is the education process of getting, you know, information out to people. But I mean, it's beyond just, listen, there's a problem with the actual, you know, lockdowns and stuff. I think the education process is also to point out how science is meant to function. I just wanted to go back to that point of yours of Neil Ferguson's. It's because it's a really good example. He's creating these models that are basically punching in a bunch of assumptions about what will happen, and then the computer puts out a projection into the future. And that's not how models are supposed to be used, right? A model is a tool to understand the past that gives you a chance to peel out patterns to say, okay, here, this could explain it, in order to, you know, then build an understanding of how the complicated processes work, whether it's in geology, understanding how tectonics works, or how a virus spreads through a population. So it's a useful tool to develop ideas about how a process works, but that is now being hijacked to create these projections. Like they're essentially the black box that legitimizes a back of the napkin set of assumptions. Because in reality, when you're using it for forecasting, you are just putting in a bunch of assumptions. Change one number and the entire thing looks different.
I can't think of one model that is proven to be accurate. I really can't. In this whole virus rolling out of the COVID-19 emergency, I can't think of one model that's worked. I would much rather have those graphs that you gave me, that we discussed, and that tells me what I need to know, and it's factually based. It's based on the real evidence, objective reality.
And the model also is so easy to manipulate for a political outcome. I mean, we've seen Dr. Tam putting out their models, and you're going, is it the model that's driving the policy, or is it the policy outcome that you want, that you're trying to scare folks into getting the vaccine, that's driving the assumptions that are feeding into that model? I don't have the answer, right? But it's pretty clear that it's not functioning the way it's supposed to be.
Okay. Well, I think people do, education is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And people need that education, they need that information so that they can start to bring their concerns to bear.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that if they do, if enough of them do, they are going to have the power to push those other influencers aside.
Yeah. I mean, I think if there's one silver lining that's coming out of this horrific situation, is that as we're realizing how off the mark our public institutions, our scientific institutions, how they've all essentially stopped functioning the way they should, we're all digging, right? We're all informing ourselves about things that we would have never ever thought about even reading about, 5 years ago.
Got that right. Yep.
And so, yeah, like we are all becoming a lot more educated about how the world works and how take science, how science is meant to function. What is it beyond just the technical skills of gathering data that actually allows science to serve as a tool to discover objective truths? And I mean, the transparency, the ability for anybody to be able to raise a question or to point out something that doesn't work, and to have public debate, that without public debate, you have no ability to get at truth.
Well said, Julius. Before we go, is there a website or anything you'd like to draw our audience's attention to?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you want to follow more of my work, go to my website. It's www.juliusruechel.com. And so
How do you spell Ruechel? How do you spell
Ruechel?
Roger.
And then from there, I've got a link on there as well to my YouTube channel and to all my social media accounts. But my website is my main home.
Okay. And for people who aren't familiar with Canadian Citizens for Charter Rights and Freedoms, our website is www.canadiancitizens.org, and we have access links to all of our updates, research, and whatnot on that webpage as well. Well, this has been extremely informative, Julius. I've had a really good time, and I got a feeling a lot of people are going to be interested in hearing just what you had to say. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me out and chatting with me. It was fun.
Okay, thanks, Julius.
Thanks so much.
Okay.